You walk out the door on your way to work, say goodbye to your mother and father. The afternoon goes by. You're expected home for dinner. Nighttime comes to pass, and still no word from you. Your family realizes something is very much wrong. Police are called in, and an investigation begins. Every indication points to you skipping town and running away, except for one sketchy neighbor who seems to know a hell of a lot more than he is sharing. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It's near noon. 17-year-old Valerie Tindall is getting ready to head off to work, collecting her belongings, walking toward the front door. Her parents are home, and she stops to say hello and goodbye. An active social media user, the photos of Valerie on her various accounts depict a warm, happy, and typical teenage girl, graciously making her way through life. Valerie has dirty blonde, light brown hair, hazel eyes, inviting and peaceful, and at times wears large, black-framed glasses. It's 2023, and she is looking forward to and scheduled to graduate from Rushville Consolidated High School in Indiana the following June, 2024. On June 7th, 2023, as Valerie is heading out the door to work, she seems happy, content, and smiles at her parents. Her first couple of jobs, Valerie worked at McDonald's and Domino's Pizza, but she had given up the hustle of fast food in lieu of landscaping 2 years ago, particularly lawn care maintenance. She loves being outdoors, in the sun and fresh air. Her dream is to become a veterinarian, no doubt inspired in some ways by her beloved dog, Lucy, a Boston Terrier. Valerie grew up in Arlington, Indiana, which is the personification of small-town America. Like, I'm talking full-on John Cougar Mellencamp. Arlington boasts a population of under 500 people and is all of 1.5 square miles. 8 miles west of Arlington is Rushville, with 6,000 residents, give or take. Both towns are an hour east of Indianapolis. On that June 7th day, Valerie grabs hold of the door and tells her parents she's heading off to work and will be home later on for dinner. It's a Wednesday, and it's odd to her mother that Valerie is going to work because she'd never worked on Wednesdays before. Her boss, Patrick Scott, the owner of the lawn mowing business Valerie works for, lives just in back of the Tindalls on North Oak Street. Normally, she'd just walk over to Patrick's house and he'd drive her to the job site. But for some reason today, she has decided to drive herself. So she hops into her green Honda Accord and heads off to nearby Shelbyville, the South High apartment complex, where she is set to spend a good portion of the day cutting the lawn. It's now just after noon, June 7th, as Valerie starts her vehicle and drives out of the Tindalls' driveway. By the end of that day, when Valerie's mother returns home from work herself, and Valerie is not yet back, her mother wonders what time to expect her for dinner. Perhaps she's working late. So she calls Valerie. That first call goes straight to voicemail. As she continues calling throughout a 2-hour period that evening, Valerie's mother meets up with the same voicemail. Strange, her mother thinks, because Valerie always answers the phone or calls right back. So her mother calls Valerie's boss, Patrick Scott. They're neighbors, after all. The families know each other very well. Is Valerie still working? She asks. Valerie didn't work today, Scott says. Not working today. Last time I saw her, Scott adds, was yesterday. This kind of makes sense because Valerie's mother knew she never worked on Wednesdays. Had Valerie lied? Valerie's mother then calls several of Valerie's friends and some family members in the area, places where Valerie could have gone off to. Why would Valerie say she was going into work if she wasn't? She is not the type of kid to make up stories to cover for doing things she knows her parents would disapprove of. Nobody her mother contacts has seen or heard from Valerie throughout that day or even into the evening. Valerie's parents are now very concerned. It's as if she took off just before noon and nobody has seen or heard from her since. Valerie's boss, Patrick Scott, and his wife show up at the Tindalls that evening, knock on the door, and offer to help any way they can. Valerie is a good kid, works hard. There has to be some sort of explanation to this. She would never just hightail it out of town and take off. Late into the night, Valerie's parents decide it's time to call the Rush County Sheriff's Department and report Valerie missing. And I want to just say something here if I can. It feels sometimes like when we hear these stories, they have a familiar ring to them. Somebody leaves the house or work, their phone is unreachable. They don't show up when they're supposed to. A night goes by, still no word. Law enforcement is called, and a search begins. But I want to underscore that, though the stories might all sound similar, and we've almost become somewhat desensitized to just how harrowing and anxious and scary each one is, these families going through this at the time are in a constant state of fear of the worst. It's pure hell. If you're a parent, can you imagine your child going missing? I mean, I can relate to being in a store or somewhere in public and losing sight of my child for a few seconds and the immediate panic that sets in. It is that panic, times 1,000, for hours and hours and even days on end. You have no idea what to do, who to turn to. Law enforcement, generally, despite what they might claim, especially when we're talking about a 17-year-old, are thinking, run away. I've sat with families of the missing, and the sheer horror they go through is excruciating. And most of the time, not all, but most of the time, it is someone within their inner circle who knows something they are not sharing. What's alarming and concerning for me in Valerie's case is that a statewide silver alert is issued for Valerie, but not until June 10th, a full 2 days after she has been missing. That is such a crucial period of time in missing person cases, the first 24 to 48 hours. So much can happen. In this case, to their credit, the sheriff's department doesn't muck around with any sort of benign promises of a young girl out sowing her wild oats or taking a joyride with friends. After issuing the alert, they explain to Valerie's family that they believe she is in extreme danger. So it's clear law enforcement has information they are not divulging. By June 15th, the sheriff's department reiterates the fact to the family how worried they are, without telling them that since about 12:30 p.m. on June 7th, over a week ago now, Valerie's phone has not been on, and all of her social media accounts have been silent and inactive. None of those are good signs, obviously. Now, putting myself in the shoes of an investigator in this case, I can only work with the facts I have. I know that Valerie was in a good mood and smiling when she left. And she said she was on her way to work at the South High apartment complex across the street from Shelbyville High School in nearby Shelbyville. According to Valerie, she was supposed to be meeting Patrick Scott, her boss, both of them there to begin cutting the lawn. Yet, he says he never asked Valerie to work on that day, and the last time he saw her was the day before. Once I verify all of that, I can move on to my next line of inquiry. But I need to nail all of that information down solidly and make sure it's accurate. Investigators speak with Patrick Scott. They need to get every single detail they can from him. The family appreciates Patrick and his wife offering to help, along with their concern. The entire community is now involved on some level, if only turning their thoughts to the family. In areas of the country this small, when something happens to one person, it affects everyone. There is, of course, chit-chat and rumors spreading around, but the bottom line for an investigator is follow the evidence you have in front of you. As they begin talking to everyone a second and third time, on June 21st, 2 weeks into the case, the Sheriff's Department issues a public plea. They focus the plea on Valerie's vehicle, interestingly, saying, "We are requesting property owners between Shelbyville and Arlington that have deep creek beds, low-level fields, ravines, and properties off a roadway. And when you are traveling, be on the lookout for areas where the vehicle could have left the roadway and not been seen easily." The thought is, of course, maybe Valerie had an issue while driving and ran her car off the road, or that somebody has abducted her and hidden her vehicle. Nothing comes from that plea, not one tip about the car. July passes. No word on any progress or any sign of Valerie. After almost 2 months, in August, the Sheriff's Department issues another public plea, this one sparking some hope and concern at the same time. "We believe it is possible that Valerie has been receiving aid from individuals whose goal is to keep her hidden." They encourage the public to be on the lookout for her car. Near the end of August, the Sheriff's Department pays a visit to Valerie's parents. They brace for the worst. The U.S. Marshal Service is now involved, investigators explain. And we want to inform you that back on June 26th, we found Valerie's vehicle. Where, they wonder. They explain that the car was located at an apartment complex close to the one in Shelbyville where she was off to work that day. The license plates were gone. The car was parked among several junk cars so as to blend in. Interesting. And scary. So Valerie had gone to the apartment complex, presumably to work. There could be no other reason. She didn't know anyone there, but her boss says he never told her to meet him there. And she wasn't even scheduled to work that day. Before leaving, investigators share one more bit of information with Valerie's parents. They know Patrick Scott does the lawn care at that apartment complex close to where her car was found. He's denied seeing her that day, but we believe he may be assisting Valerie and that she was with him on the day she went missing. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement, which allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions really help. You are my public relations and social media team now, and without your help, I could not do this. And that support, I must tell you, means everything. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to thank each one of you for listening. We can grow this show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it. If you go to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com, you can contact me there to suggest cases or just say hello. And look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Let's take a short break. Come right back. The Sheriff's Department had not given the Tindall family all of the information it had on that day in August they stopped by to update them. As an investigator, there's a time to be fully open about all you know and a time to keep certain pieces of information to yourself. The idea here was to let everyone know that Patrick Scott was talking to them. He knew information he had been holding back and was in the process of now apparently coming clean. It seemed that, perhaps, Patrick Scott was just trying to stay loyal to an employee he liked and had, maybe against his better judgment, helped her. As they talk to him a bit more, Scott opens up. He tells the sheriff's department that Valerie had run away because of some trouble she'd had with her father. And yes, he helped her. I did meet her at the apartments, he says. I drove her from there to meet a boy in Homer, a neighboring town. He adds that he had never seen the boy before and didn't know him. What kind of car did he have? They asked Scott. A little blue one. What about the make and model? He says he has no idea. After dropping her off, what did you do? I went home. The following day, Thursday, I then returned to the apartment complex and moved her car. She had asked me to do it. She said she was leaving and never coming back. I was just trying to help her. Investigators could buy that scenario. It would not be the first time they had heard of a young girl leaving home with a boy and taking off and somebody helping Romeo and Juliet get away. Only this information has a certain foul odor to it. None of it fits into Valerie's character. It did not sound like anything she would ever do. The family had not heard of any boy in her life, and Valerie had always been very open and honest about those sorts of things. So with this new information, investigators have additional questions. Patrick Scott answers by saying that in a perfect world, sure, the girl's parents would know all about her life. But Valerie had been having issues with her dad, and it's because of that she had been so secretive about everything. So this is the story that Patrick Scott is trying to sell. By then, the sheriff's department is able to get a lot of data from Valerie's phone. The last time she texted Scott was 11:23 a.m. on that morning she went missing. I'll be there soon, that text read. It turned out to be the last time she used her phone. Patrick Scott is this guy in his late 50s. He sports a gray beard, more Duck Dynasty than GQ. Blue eyes, a full shock of gray hair, long and kind of scraggly. He has that landscaper's tan, a red face, dark arms. He lives in a rundown, one-level, small home with junk all over the yard, grass growing up through old machinery and broken-down cars, waist-high in some areas, which seems kind of odd for a guy who cuts grass for a living. Valerie had met Scott because he is a neighbor, and she also hung around with one of his granddaughters sometimes. The neighborhood where they live is beyond quiet, with very low crime. In fact, Valerie's mother later told the Daily Mail that she'd moved the family from Indianapolis to Arlington years before to get away from the spiraling crime rates in the big city. And now here she finds herself, facing the worst possible outcome she could have imagined. Because he had lied to police, and likely for other reasons they are not sharing, the sheriff's department arrests Scott for providing false information, a misdemeanor. I think their plan here is to get Scott in jail for a bit, get him uncomfortable, and get him talking some more. And also gain access to his electronics and see what the hell he has been up to, and if his stories gel with what he's saying. It's obvious he knows more. The question becomes, is he holding back out of loyalty or perhaps more sinister reasons? One of the things that has bothered investigators since almost the day Valerie went missing is that Scott burned his garage down a day after Valerie went missing. And he has no real explanation for this to speak of. Just that he didn't want it anymore and it was easier than tearing it down. Is the burning of the garage a coincidence or something more? When they speak to him again, Scott says that he had, in fact, brought Valerie over to his house that day and dropped her off. Then he went back to the job site to mow the apartment complex lawn. When he got home later that day, Valerie is gone. She ran away, he says. So now they have two stories. First, he drops her off in nearby Homer to meet a boy so they can run off together. And now he pivots and says he dropped her off at his house and he never saw her again. I'm just kind of speculating here, but I would bet these investigators dropped their head in their hands while talking to him and were like, dude, what in the actual fuck? Are you kidding me? You bring Valerie back to your house, which is directly in back of Valerie's home, so she can run away from there? And then you go back to work, go home, head off to Valerie's house to offer your support to her parents with your wife? Not buying any of that bullshit. When they go through his phone, it seems Patrick Scott is telling the truth. Well, somewhat. His phone shows that he returned to his home on June 7th, 2023 at 12:59 p.m. Yet, in taking his online behaviors over the weeks leading up to this day into account, along with what else they find in his phone, bright red flags pop up. For one, on that day, Scott never goes online, which is something his previous behavior showed he does every day. Second, he deactivates many of the apps on his phone that day, which he had never done in the past. Yet the one app he does not deactivate is the health app, which he probably just overlooked. And what they find on that app is compelling and alarming, but tells a story. Patrick Scott's body records significant health activities at 1:35 p.m. on that day Valerie went missing. His body was being so stressed that the app activated itself in the background and began recording. His heart rate went up significantly, and he is taking many steps all at once, but not going very far. He is fighting with someone, in other words, or struggling, or wrestling. You get the picture? So now it's like, come on, dude, what's going on here? He doesn't say much. And what about that trip to Home Depot, they ask him, the day after Valerie goes missing? We know you went to Home Depot. He shrugs. Look, a landscaping dude going to Home Depot is not a big deal, but a landscaping dude buying 4 2x4x8 pieces of wood and 2 sheets of 4x8 feet plywood, well, that changes things a bit. What was the guy building? Scott is released, but investigators have only started with him. They have been developing a probable cause affidavit this entire time based on what they now believe, which is that Valerie Tindall is buried somewhere on Scott's gross, overgrown, dumpy property, and they are planning to take dogs and head out to that property and begin searching. Let's take our final break, come back, and I'll go through how this all plays out. And if you'll allow me to say something, if you enjoy this show and like true crime books, I have almost 50 books available. Check out mwilliamphelps.com or go onto Amazon and search my name. My latest book is called We Thought We Knew You, which is going to be a 3-part Hulu series likely available during the fall of this year. Patrick Scott is your typical sociopath in the same way he is your typical killer who thinks he is smarter than not only anyone else, but the cops chasing after him. I say this all the time. Electronic devices, even if you think you are disabling them or deleting information, are recording your every move and storing it in a cloud or somewhere on the device you do not know exists. You are never, ever going to outsmart technology in this regard. Ask a serial killer if he carried a phone with him when stalking and preying upon his victims, Or he kept a PC at home that he used to shop for ropes and knives, tools of the trade, on Amazon for. Most will tell you no. They are electronically off the radar. Yet most one-off killers are the complete opposite. This is one of the differences between the sociopath and the psychopath. Method and pathology. One runs on emotion, the sociopath. The other on logic, the psychopath, however skewed that logic is. But anyway, let's get back to this week's piece of shit, Patrick Scott. On October 11th, 2023, the Sheriff's Department brings cadaver dogs out to Patrick Scott's property. On his land is a small pond, and the dogs move toward the water almost immediately, hitting on a scent coming off the water. From there, they call in the Indiana State Police dive team. After a long search, nothing is recovered from the pond. But the water can sometimes be what is called a hold odor, meaning the dogs got a hit from the wind brushing over the pond at the time from another location on the property. Dogs sniff for scents in the air, not in the ground or in the water. They hit on the air that's carrying the scent. After some research, they discover that the wind on that day had been coming from the direction of Patrick Scott's house. 2 days later, they do a flyover search over the property, looking for any disturbances in the ground. And when they do this, they find two specific areas where it appears the ground had been dug up recently. The problem they run into is that the areas are located on another piece of land Patrick Scott owns. But that land is not part of the area where Patrick had given them permission to search. So they need to apply for a search warrant. That warrant comes back on November 27th, 2023. They go immediately to what is a large dirt pile where they observe a hole and some additional debris and dirt which have been disturbed. As they start digging, they come across a large box made of wood, hence the trip to Home Depot Patrick Scott had made. Inside the box, they find a bunch of paperwork and several VHS tapes. It's kind of a WTF moment. So they continue digging and soon come across a second homemade wooden box. That box is wrapped in a tarp. Opening the box, they find what appears to be a human being wrapped in plastic and duct tape all around. As they cut open the plastic, one of the investigators notices fingers with orange fingernail polish. They then go to a photo of Valerie Tindall from June 7th, 2023, the day she went missing, which she had posted on her social media accounts that morning. It's the same fingernail polish. Patrick Scott is arrested and charged with murder. They get him inside the interrogation room, and he cracks, immediately admitting to murdering Valerie after they explain what they found on his property. Scott says that Valerie got carried away. Of course she did. Let's blame the victim. But they allow him to talk. He says she tried to blackmail me. Blackmail you? Yeah, into buying her a new car. She tried to seduce me and I wasn't having it. And so I strangled her with a belt. Not go to her parents or people she knew, not try to talk to Valerie, not tell his wife, but get a fucking belt and kill the girl. I don't believe any of this bullshit. I believe he tried to seduce her and she fought. That's what the health app seems to suggest. It kind of just happened, Scott tells them. Oh, really? He goes on to say that he never had a sexual relationship with Valerie, though he did buy her gifts, often pay for her gas and food, and I took her on trips too. I think it's all bullshit. He made a pass at Valerie, she rejected him, and so he killed her. After reaching a plea agreement on March 11th, 2024, Patrick Scott is sentenced to 57 years in prison, where he will die. He is also required to pay $10,000 restitution to Valerie's family. That entire time, everyone was looking for Valerie. She was less than 100 yards away from her home in a homemade wooden coffin wrapped in plastic, buried in her neighbor's yard. Valerie had worked for Scott for 2 years. In the end, he showed zero remorse, and instead, he blamed her, the victim, for her own death. That, my true crime friends, is a total scumbag. Before burying her, he kept Valerie's body for 2 days in his office as everyone searched for her. I cannot imagine what he did to her body during that time. I hope he dies in a disgusting prison, and we never hear from this piece of shit again. That's it for this week. Remember, I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts, and log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases, or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. Be safe, be aware. Sources for today's episode include Probable Cause Affidavit, State of Indiana versus Patrick Scott, search warrants for Scott's properties. Valerie Tindall's mom says accused killer Patrick Scott acted like jealous boyfriend before grisly murder, by Emma Richter. Daily Mail, December 3rd, 2023. CTL is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, written and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.